Welcome back to Breakdown Friday. Joseph Ward, Patrick Irvin, Professor Carl Tone, Jones, PC. So before we dive all the way into this clip, I think it would be proper for us to define what Black consciousness is, because the premise or what he's writing about is a fear of Black consciousness. So before we get to the fear of Black consciousness, I think we need to define and understand what Black consciousness is. What is Black consciousness from the standpoint of that was given to us through the Black conscious movement through Steve Biko, but also looking at what is Black consciousness today in 2023, and based off of what Black consciousness is today in 2023, do white people fear our current version of Black consciousness? So before, and I do have some Steve Biko information, but I kind of want to get the conversation started and kind of jump into that. So PC, you looking like 100,000 there down there. So start with you, my brother. Go and you can take some points from the clip, but I kind of right now just focusing on what is Black consciousness. From your understanding, what is Black consciousness?
Right now, Black consciousness is non-existent.
Well, before we get to right now, just what was it supposed to be? Or what was it when it was given to us through the Black conscious movement? From your understanding,
knowledge of self. A sense of who we are, culturally speaking. A sense that we came from greatness, but also that we represent greatness in being Black. Identifying unapologetically our love for being Black. And you have various things that went on, especially in the 60s, when you had Black nationals go to James Brown to come up with the song, Black and Proud. You had a movement where Blacks no longer tried to dye their hair or conk their hair or straighten their hair. You saw the impressionable afros. You saw the movements towards being cognizant in terms of Black politics, racial politics. So, you saw what was supposed to be an awakening of consciousness, awakening of recognizing who we are. I mean, that's what consciousness means, to be awake. And so I'm gonna stop right there because I want to hear what Patrick has to say.
all right, Pat, just dealing with the Black consciousness as it was given to us from the Black conscious movement. From your understanding, what is Black consciousness?
I agree with what PC said. I think it's summed up as a sense of identity, a sense of self, something that we could be proud of, that would contrast and give us something to latch on to that's, opposite of what we had been given. So, I'd like to just simplify it down and say Black consciousness is Black identity. In everything that comes along with having an identity, a positive identity with historical origins, a vibrant present, and a bright future.
Mm-hmm. So I agree with all of what both of you said, because from my understanding, Black consciousness was knowledge of self, knowledge of where you come from, you loving who you learning to love your African features, you loving to learn your African past, your history, and your culture and everything about being African, and you want to present the best qualities of being Black. So I'm going to read the philosophy of Black consciousness, and this is coming directly from the ideas of Steve Biko. So the Black conscious movement centered on race as a determining factor in the oppression of Black people in South Africa in response to racial oppression and the dehumanization of Black people under apartheid. Black, as defined by Biko, was not limited to Africans, but also included Asians and coloreds, South Africans, mixed race, including African, European, and or Asian origin, incorporating Black theology, indigenous values, and political organization against the ruling system. The movement viewed the liberation of the mind as the primary weapon in the fight for freedom in South Africa, defining Black consciousness as first an inward-looking process where Black people regained the pride stripped away from them by the apartheid system. His philosophy casts a positive retelling of African history, which has been heavily distorted and vilified by European imperialists in an attempt to construct their colonies. In his writing, he notes that a people without a positive history is like a vehicle without an engine. Read this last part. A necessary step towards restoring dignity to Black people, according to Biko, involves elevating the heroes of African history and promoting African heritage to deconstruct the idea of Africa as the dark continent. Black consciousness seeks to extract the positive values within indigenous African cultures and to make it a standard with which Black people judge themselves, the first form of resistance towards imperialism and apartheid. According to Biko, what Black consciousness seeks to do is to produce at the output end of the process real Black people who do not consider themselves as appendages to the white society. So, with us giving our thoughts and our definitions of Black consciousness, me reading Steve Biko's ideas and thoughts about Black consciousness, I'm gonna ask this question. How would you define Black consciousness today as it's practiced or as you see it today in 2023? Are we still along the lines of what Steve Biko is talking about, or have we kind of ventured away? So start with you again, PC. How would you view or how would you characterize or define Black consciousness today in 2023?
Watered down.
Right.
Yeah, I just don't see. I see people actually moving away from it. I see it being something that's extremely apologetic. Often when we hear people talk about being Black, they almost have to give sort of like a public address, a PSA about or a disclaimer about this not being anti-white. This is not it's not an unapologetic movement or thought process. Most Black people nowadays, I would say 99% of the population doesn't. If they could wash this Blackness off of them, they would. And when we start talking about the consciousness, it's a racket nowadays. I believe there's a lot of scammers. There's a lot of people who utilize this to profit. So it's not necessarily about educating us about the importance of knowing ourselves, about defining ourselves and who we are. And for instance, you got people out there right now, in your state right now, Joe, fighting your governor because what is it? Critical race theory has been removed from the schools, in the teachings in Florida. So, if we were talking about real Black consciousness, Black people wouldn't have never allowed for that to be in the hands of the government. It would have been something that would have been instituted by institutions created by Black people. And similar to what the Jewish community does with synagogues, they allow their children to go to school Monday through Friday. But on Saturday, they re-educate their children about who they are, their history, and their place in history, the importance of their culture. They show their children the ways that their culture operates and builds, by showing their collective works and how they build with one another and support one another. And then, so their children already have an identity. It's not in the hands of the public schools. It's not in the hands of the state. It's in the hands of their community. If we were woke, conscious about who we are, then that would take precedence and that would take priority, because we would understand that that's foundational to the bigger picture. Back then, you literally had a Black community. We don't have Black communities now. We have populist a black populations and pools of black people in hoods. We don't necessarily practice camaraderie. You can't even, most people don't even know who their next door neighbor is these days. So when we start identifying what black consciousness is now, it's it's watered down Kool-Aid, and I'll land my plane there.
So I know Pat usually the villain, but I've been the villain last couple of weeks. I like this role, so but now just playing. But and I'm just pushing back for conversation and expand it, and just to make sure we get it flowing. So with the amount of Black history that's available on social media, you can scroll up, you can see Black history, you can get links, Black people have more access to Black history nowadays. Why do you still think that we don't know who we are?
Because most black people run away from who we are. It ain't even that we don't know who we are. We know who we are, but most run away from it. When you start to see people exhibiting black culture, is typically in some type of costume or fashion. So it's at an event. When you start talking about understanding knowledge of self, it turns into a game of Negro Jeopardy. We want to show the world we know all the trivia about being black, but we don't implement none of the culture. We don't implement none of the works. We don't implement any of the things that glue, that stick to itness, the more ways and the folk ways of black culture. We don't implement any of those things. We mostly run away from it because we identify it with danger. I was just talking to somebody recently about the latest documentary, the Tupac documentary, which I hadn't watched, but I'm familiar with the story, specifically his mother's story, and the fact that black people had the consciousness beaten out of us in the 70s with all the state-sanctioned killings of black dignitaries and black nationals. We were terrorized to the point where the generations that survived the 70s made sure that we didn't really understand those things, or we wouldn't want to push forward those things in the 80s. And so when you start to see the culture coming back alive, it was really with started off with conscious rap, conscious hip hop, and also the showing of the film Malcolm X by Spike Lee. And that's when we start to have a invigoration of knowledge and consciousness and things of that nature. But it was more so from a scholastic point of view. It wasn't about a cultural thing. It was more so about being able to debate other blacks. It went from debating people from other nationalities to blacks debating blacks. And then it turned into, it just turned into a circus. And we haven't been able to build off of it because many of the people that created those platforms were profiteers. So, if you just looked at the information within itself would tell you, all you need to know about what we need to do to build black power, what we need to do to build on black consciousness, with that being the center. But a lot of us run away from it.
So we surface level than
worse than surface level. We're transparent. No, we're not transparent. We're what's the word I'm looking for? Effervescence or whatever that. We're see-through.
Yeah.
Translucent.
Yeah, we're
translucent. There you go.
You know what I'm saying? And so we don't necessarily, we look past it, we look through it. It's invisible to us because most people nowadays, even so-called self-identified conscious black folk, are really appealing to the affections of white folk. And they want to be seen as the Messiah. They want to be seen as the one to lead us through the promised land, the one to part the Red Sea and things of that nature. They don't necessarily see themselves as one amongst us. They don't necessarily see doing this for the purpose of freeing their people. They just want to be seen like, I think we was talking about earlier, some of these cats want to end up in the history book as a note in the history book. So
okay. So I wrote that down. We're gonna come back to that. The black conscious, the figures, the image of black consciousness now. as far as what you're talking. Because I want to bring Pat in. Uh, so how would you characterize or define Black consciousness currently, right now in 2023?
I agree with PC. Um, Currently, right now in 2023, I think Black consciousness is in a place where nobody really takes it seriously. Um, the scholars are not really, the true scholars aren't really being connected to by the masses, are connecting to the masses of Black people. The masses of Black people are, the melting pot theory works. We'll say that. And this is what, because they tried to change it. Now they say America's not a melting pot; it's more of a salad bowl where everybody still gets to retain certain pieces of their culture, and when eaten together, you get the American experience. But each culture still, no, it's a melting pot. It's just the stuff in the pot wasn't melting fast. It's a slow process. Cultures merging together is a slow process. And Black people are still merging into and embracing our melanated whiteness. So, like PC said, there are a lot of people that know the information, know some derivative of the information. I'm not going to say they actually know the information, because a lot of them are getting their information through uh, people like us and sources like this one, and not doing any research whatsoever, um, which is not good. I don't care who your source is, me, PC, Joe, whoever. If you ain't doing no background research on what's being said, you're just as much of an idiot as the person that is following sources that you think are stupid. Y'all are the same type of idiot. Neither one of y'all are doing research. So, but the masses, I don't think the masses are moving towards Black identity in a sense that understands their history, understands their culture, understands where they're coming from. The more we push, like right now, there are a bunch of people that are bragging about being illiterate and not well read. Like people bragging about not reading books. When did learning become anti-Black? When did like accepted science become anti-Black? Like, but then on the other end of that, you want these same people, you want people. Look, I'm gonna shut it down because I'm about to go on a tangent. Black consciousness in 2023 is dead, just like hip hop.
Yeah. So when I think about Black consciousness, because when I saw the clip, I was scrolling, because this wasn't even really the video that I was going to use this week. But when I saw this, I thought it was a great opportunity for us to take a look at Black consciousness, what our ideas and thoughts of what Black consciousness is versus what it was originally defined to be given to us, but also looking at the context of Black consciousness in today. And I don't see a lot of consciousness today. I'm not saying that there are no semblance of Black consciousness anywhere. I do think there are small pockets, but I think one of the problems is like y'all said earlier, Black consciousness has been satirized and characterized so much because so many people have lived up to the stereotypes. And if we wouldn't have so many people living up to the stereotypes that are deemed conscious people and who characterize themselves as conscious people, then the satire wouldn't even have been able to stick and last this long, because we all know my brother man, one fish, two fish, black fish, blue fish, all the caricatures that have been made in the hotel label and all these things here. So there are a lot of different people who've come along, who've had the conscious label, who didn't do a great service, who did a great disservice to the conscious label and the conscious community, the conscious crowd. We've talked about the failed leadership and the failed followership. We've already talked about that, not to go too deep into that. We got videos on that. But what I am saying is, when we think about what Black consciousness is, and especially if we're gonna, as we move forward into thinking or answering or even getting ideas around, do white people feel Black consciousness? I don't think we respect Black consciousness. And one of the reasons why is, like, one of the running jokes on the show from a conversation piece he had, ain't no money in nation builder. Because if we go back to what Steve Biko is saying about what Black consciousness is, Black consciousness seeks to do is to produce, at the output end of the process, real Black people who do not consider themselves as appendages to the white society.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things we really, one of the things we don't give credit to is the fact that, I think we sort of like gloss around it. I'm not talking about us. I'm just talking about people who consider themselves thought leaders in this area. We don't necessarily give credit to our enemies in terms of how they were able to utilize counterintelligence, how they were able to control the narrative from both sides. We talk about how they're able to go into African countries and how they're able to coerce leadership in those countries. Or if not so, then they replace them, with corrupt regimes. And we don't look at it from the fact that they did the same thing here. In fact, most of the time, we really think, when we think about it, they practiced on us in terms of putting people in place in leadership and corrupting those who were giving loud bullhorns and platforms to speak for us. They actually create our leaders.
Right.
Nobody pinned Jesse Jackson as the descendant of or the replacement for Martin Luther King, but the American media put microphones in front of his hands and then called him the next black leader. People like Al Sharpton. We don't call them leaders. We didn't elect them. We didn't choose these people. But yet and still, our enemies chose those who would be given to us, and we ignorantly accepted it in a lot of cases.
Right. So it would be safe to say that, according to Steve Biko's description of what Black consciousness is, today in 2023, we have significantly less people who can be considered Black conscious or who represent the Black consciousness movement, because, like I just said, it's creating people who are not independent to white supremacy, to the white system. Most of the people you just named, or all the people you just named, were an appendage to the system, because we found out they were getting paid off by the system. And then anytime a leader is placed in front of you, that is a literal appendage of the system of white supremacy. So we are not, well, we can say, it's safe to say, the majority of Black people do not uphold the principles of Black consciousness as it was originally given to us. Not today.
Go ahead, Pat. I'm sorry.
You're on mute, Pat.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we have to be real about is the fact that that's never been for most of Black history in America. Most Black people have not been even seeking Black consciousness.
Right. But I think one of the issues is it's far less people today than it was back then.
we go back we go back to a lot of movements. One of the things that I think about a lot is that we've got to understand the nature of ourselves better. And as powerful as black people are, it's not as powerful as we think we are.
Right.
And for as much as black people are capable of, it's not as much as we think we're capable of. And for as far along as black people think that they are, it's not as far along as we actually are. And so I think one of the things that comes with understanding that, at least for me, is being able to recognize when you are engaged in a losing battle. And so I go back to what PC is always talking about and what we've talked about on numerous occasions, which is finding that group of people and building that pocket if you can. At least, even if you can't build it physically, build a psychological safe space for yourself and your peers where y'all can congregate together and kind of build each other up. And like, because we're existing in a plane that is ever shrinking, and I don't believe we have enough force to expand it. So I think in 100 years, if it still exists, which it very well may, it's going to be even less people that are black conscious
Especially if
than
we
there are
continue what we're
now.
doing. If we continue what we're doing now, if nothing
But
changes.
we don't have any examples of doing anything else. Not in mass. We have example here and example there and example
Mhm.
like of small blips of little explosions going off that push the perimeter temporarily. But in terms of a massive move, there's no example of a
Right.
massive movement of black people
Right.
pushing back against anti-black sentiment. For the vast majority of us, we bought into the anti-black sentiment. And right now, what we're struggling with is those of us that see it accepting the fact that it's there, and those of us that are a part of accepting it, accepting the fact that we've accepted it.
Exceptionally. Yeah. So with that being said, with us saying that, why? Because the gentleman is saying that, and I know this is surrounded around his book. I just saw this video the other day, so I just learned he have a book. I haven't read the book yet, but I will get the book and we will do a review of it. But I think we've been talking enough that people kind of get that we don't. The three of us don't believe that white people fear black consciousness.
Not today.
I mean,
No.
and so I don't. Let me. I do want to say this. I don't want this to come off as if like we're going after the guy, and that because it has nothing to do with him. But it just made me think, and I want to analyze black consciousness, like us. What is black consciousness? But he did. He brought up something that made me kind of good for conversation, but a good critical thinking point is a fear of black consciousness. Now, overall, we know at the end of the day, white folk fear losing what they built. We know that is a truth. They fear losing what they built at the end of the day. But to get to that fear, it's a long road to get to that particular fear, especially the way we're moving now. So, if the question is on the table, do white people fear black consciousness? I don't see why black people would fear today's version of black consciousness or anybody who say they're black and conscious today, because like Neely Fuller said, how you know a black leader is not effective is because when the people don't use their information, when they're not taking the information, actively using the information and making tangible change and making progress with the information, you can tell that black leader is being effective. So if that black leader isn't being effective because the people aren't moved and people aren't using the information, there's no real fear. There's no fear by white folk. Why would they fear that? Why would they fear? Because at the end of the day, it's another feel good session. So I think, and it's once again not attacking him, but I just don't see why white people would fear black consciousness today.
Well, I mean, one of the things he did say was that when you start talking about black consciousness, it doesn't even take into consideration its position, if I heard him correctly, concerning white supremacy. I'm trying to paraphrase one of the things he said.
We can play
And
it
that,
again.
I mean, I think I got it. So, once upon a time, white folk, the power structure, white supremacy, it did fear black consciousness,
Right.
and they came up with many plans to uproot it and to make sure that they have. And pro papers, when they talked about, did it do the thing again?
Yeah, and that wasn't as bad, but say that again.
The COINTELPRO papers, when the COINTELPRO papers were created, it spoke specifically about the elimination of black messiahs, the elimination of radical black nationalism, and it spoke towards infiltrating these groups to make sure it didn't happen again. Now, we know from various interviews that's exactly what happened. When those who were, I mean, the William O'Neills, there were others. I believe it was Gil. What's the brother's name? Shit. But the brother, y'all know what I'm talking about, Gil, who had the talk show in the 70s.
Yeah. Gil
So
Noble.
Gil Noble, thank you. And where he would interview various infiltrators, and they would actually break down what they did to destabilize potential cultural hubs in the black community and movements. They don't have to do that now because there's controlled opposition. Black Lives Matter was controlled opposition, and it was actually utilized to destabilize any type of momentum that would be gained following the deaths of Trayvon Martin, Jordan Davis, Mike Brown, uh, my young brother Crawford out there in Ohio, all these different black deaths, black male deaths. It was used to destabilize it. They would take the energy from it, siphon the energy off, and create fruitless protest where our young brothers and sisters laying in the streets and things of that nature, and then would just abandon them, for which would cause many of them to fall apart. I mean, now we have to pay a black tax for that. So,
So as you were talking, I'm thinking, especially the first part of your response. I think that kind of when you are explaining what happened to black people, when you're explaining what happened to the black conscious movement, what happened to the Black Panther movement, the pro-black movement, the Black Power movement, all the movements that we had, white people came and did their best to shut them down and shut them down. So that is a direct reason of why black consciousness isn't a force today as it was in the past. But it could also be looked at as a reason why white people would not necessarily fear what black consciousness is today, but fear what black consciousness could be if we got our shit together. Because I think that's the place that I'm at with this is because I'm doing as much thinking and pondering over the author's words as much as possible, and I do think they fear, like I said, they fear losing what they built, but also if we ever got our stuff together, we could be a force. So they would do what they need to do to keep us from getting our stuff. I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, let me throw it back.
Go
because
ahead.
here's the problem.
Go ahead.
Um, One, they don't need us to maintain what they've built, and
Mm-hmm.
that goes back into what we were saying before about black people not being as powerful as we think we are. I'm not saying we're not powerful, but in our minds, we are all powerful, and we're not. Black people have been replaced as an economic driver and as a labor force. We're not needed in the same way that we were 100 years ago, especially not 200 years ago. Um, and then two, so fear of black consciousness and being afraid of losing what they built. Those are two fundamentally different things. Um, the other thing is, I think when you look at the program, right? Like we talk about the program, but we don't really talk about the program when we're in a space to talk about it with people that might not be familiar with it. So a lot of people don't understand how violent and bloody and how many revolts there were on the slave ships crossing the
Mm-hmm.
transatlantic slaves.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that the crew used to do, the slave owners used to do to keep the crew from revolting was dismantle black bodies and hang them up,
And put them across the ship.
right, all over the ship. The programming there, because black people at the time felt like the dismantling of a black body was a spiritual curse as well as a physical fear, torment, torture. But for them, it was more of a spiritual representation. So there's programming already started there. And in a lot of instances, you find that a lot of black people were kept in check and held at bay and given a level of respect and authority over themselves to the white slave owners and crew masters, crew people that could do that. You move into America, there were a lot of slave revolts. One of the things that they used to do in order to keep people from revolting was not only beat slaves, but to dismember them once again because of the spiritual component. These people now believe not only have I lost my life, but if you disassemble my body, then I lose the ability to transition back to the motherland in the afterlife. I become a slave in perpetuity. This is the mental conditioning. This is programming. So what ends up happening? They end up falling back and again giving authority over themselves to a white person, somebody that's not black. But this authority isn't just in terms of obedience. This authority is the ability to control my moods, my energies, my thoughts, my beliefs about what I think freedom is.
My
Because now,
reactions.
right now, freedom is not just being self-determinate in this plane of existence. Freedom is also being able to move about in the next plane of existence. And if you can control my ability to move about in the next plane of existence by something that you do to me in this plane of existence, then you have control over me to a level that is very difficult to overcome. Like these are and obviously I'm simplifying it because these things go a lot deeper than this, and we can have a conversation just on this kind of programming. But
Right.
like you said, Joe, when you mentioned the reactions in those days, right? Robbing bodies from black graves for dissection. They stopped doing that and they
Mm-hmm.
started making deals with black people that if you guys act right, we won't do this thing that terror, like the programming that goes in there. So now not only it's no longer about self-actualization or goal achievement, it's about keeping you from doing that horrible thing that you said that you would do if I did something that you disagreed with. Now the programming is shifted, and I think one of the problems we have nowadays is that programming has been rooted in us for centuries, not decades,
Yeah.
not years, not weeks, not months, centuries. That stuff is so far ingrained into us that even when we think that we are doing something good, all we're really doing is begging white people not to do something else. Like it's not even beneficial to us on a black progressive level. It's like, please, white people, don't do this awful thing. We're going to disrupt your society so that you see us as humans. You don't have to treat us any, you don't have to give us anything. Just stop doing these awful things like the programming. So that
Well,
there's no need to fear black
right,
consciousness,
right,
because black consciousness right now is all about keeping white people in a state of coolness, uh,
right,
without
right. No, so no,
SAT word.
great point about the usefulness of black people to the white society, right? Because that's what we're here to do. We're here to think. We're here to put things on the table. So, great point about the usefulness, because black people's usefulness isn't the same as it was even 50 years ago. Because, as we keep saying, the Hispanic population has passed us in wealth and numbers, and the Asians have passed us in wealth, and they're coming for us in numbers. So, essentially, we're third or fourth class citizens right now if we are talking about usefulness and value in America as a people, as seen by the white, the dominant society. So our value isn't seen the same. So therefore, that does affect how you advocate for yourself, especially since we're still dependent, since all of our resources still have to come from them. So we're not valued as a foe. We're not valued as a contender. We're not valued as somebody who will be seen as a true opposition to white supremacy. Um, of course, like I said, of course they want to protect what they built, but we are not the, like you said, we're not the threat that we think we are. We're not the threat that we even used to be. So I think black consciousness, I don't think it has to be redefined. I think it has to be actually practiced in its original sense from what Steve Biko gave us. If it's actually practiced, but not just practice from the sense of us gaining knowledge of self and feeling good about ourselves. It's like we always talking about, once you gain that knowledge, you got to use that knowledge. You have to get active with the knowledge, because that's going to be the new black consciousness if we want to do anything. Because right now we're in a critical situation. Everything is critical. Everything is critical. So whatever we're doing, it has to go past theory to action. So once again, whatever you doing in your area, whatever lane you taking, wherever you are, if you aren't doing anything to combat the system of white supremacy in any way, don't talk about being conscious. PC, you like want to jump in?
Yeah, it's real simple. If black consciousness was the power base that many of the, like I said, thought leaders say it is, and in comparison specifically to 60, 70 years ago, or 50 years ago, you would see black people dropping like flies. And I'm not talking about,
Right,
I mean, because we would be considered threats. You know,
right,
there were dozens, hundreds of police sanctioned hits put on leaders on black causes, leaders in black consciousness, leaders in black movements throughout this country. Collaboration between organizations such as the Klan and other white extremist outfits to tear down black towns, to either burn down black towns, build bridges over black towns, or to flood black towns. If if black consciousness was moving away, but that was presenting any type of threat whatsoever. Right now, what's considered black consciousness is laughable because it's more so seen as like a trend. Social media in itself has inflicted enough damage and harm to all of this because for many people, is the accessibility of social media, where people can voice their opinions without publicly coming in contact with the people they're talking to or talking about, has changed the game. So right now, this is like playing. This is no different than playing a video console. This is no different than playing one of those shoot 'em up game, first shooter games. Because people treat this like a hobby. People come on social media and they talk and spit hot fire. What did they say? I spit hot fire. You know, on social
And
media.
Dylan.
I spit hot fire on social. It ain't 9 to 5. We live in very cushy and comfortable confines. It's very hard to push for just in the first, because you aren't willing to give up those comfort, that comfortability. People aren't willing to give up that comfortability.
But yeah, I mean,
Not,
it's, but it's, I know we keep saying the same thing, but it's the same thing. If we're serious about it, well, steps have been laid out. Read the compensatory code. Read Amos Wilson's books. Read Powernomics. Read ISIS papers. Like read these different books. Read the information that the scholars have given to us, and also come up with your own solutions. Come up with your own ideas and test it. Because that's what that's. Go ahead.
No. I didn't mean to cut you off, Joe. I think Pat was alluding to something that was very important that we rarely ever talk about, and there's the spiritual aspect of this. That we don't focus on. We've gotten sort of and we move away from the spiritual connectiveness of consciousness. When you think about it, if you're conscious, that's you're talking spiritual. You're talking about out of body experiences. You're talking spiritual, and it's something that we like to shy away from because most of us like to stick to the academics. But there is a spiritual context to this, and when you look at the movements of people, when you look at the liberators of Black people, the people who fought, they were all men of God, women of God, for the most part. And whether, no matter what their spiritual system was. And that's something that we have totally gotten away from in regards to what it means. A lot of us, nowadays don't even understand Black consciousness. Many people talk socialism and Darwinism. I mean, not Darwinism, excuse me, Marxism, or Marxist, excuse me. We rarely talk about African-centered consciousness and African cosmology, which connects a lot of the dots that have been missing for a very long time.
Well, Black consciousness aim to unite citizens under the main cause of their oppression. Biko's philosophy goes further to introduce the concept of Black theology. My bad, that's the wrong part. It says Black consciousness seeks to extract the positive values within indigenous African cultures and to make it a standard with Black people judge themselves. The first form of resistance towards imperialism and apartheid. According to Biko, what Black consciousness seeks to do is to produce at the output end of the process real Black people who do not consider themselves appendages to white society. Right? So,
and
but in order to not become an appendage to white society, you have to actually take action. Because being conscious had to be more than just knowing the information. It's understanding and using as well. Because action has to come into that for you to not to totally be an appendage to white society. You got to take some kind of action to be independent.
Yeah, and I think even and this is where for everybody, right? Like, because everybody should be on a journey to learn something about something, right? Like, I'm not saying you got to be the goal of being the most historical, blah 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 blah, but everybody should be trying to learn something about something. And I think one of the most important first steps Black people can take as individuals and as a collective is that appendage piece that he talks about, disconnecting your thoughts and ideas from white people. Like, because for too many of us, black consciousness is directly tied to white activities, white actions, white consciousness, white tolerance levels. And even when we talk about ourselves, we compare ourselves. The white people, they're the standard. You know, we so like even I was in a conversation earlier not today, earlier this week with somebody that was saying, well, at least black girl asses is bigger than white girl asses. So white girl asses are the standard now. Like at every turn, we're relating
Yeah.
ourselves and our experiences to white people, and that there is no black consciousness
What?
when you're doing that. All that tells, and this is why I say all the time. All that tells me is that black people are doing their damnedest to become melanated white people.
Well, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and they were talking about the need for black people to create spaces. And my pushback to them was, well, let's just be real. When you talk about creating spaces, you're talking about creating black versions of this white thing that you either can't be a part of or you saw from a distance, or you either try to be a part of or you couldn't, or you saw from a distance and still you can be a part of. So you just decide to create your own black version of it. But if we were like we should be, and like we encourage, and like we know, uh, at least those of us that we know enough, some of us can, critical mass of us can be building and working on nation building for ourselves. But if we're doing that, we don't have to be thinking about and worrying about creating a space or creating our own black version of this white thing, because we're building our black thing. We're not even, once again, we're not even paying attention to white people from that standpoint. Are we studying them? Yes, but we're not paying attention to them to a point where we need to emulate what they're doing, because we focusing on real black consciousness.
But to do that, we got to tear down damn near every structure we got. I mean,
Right? Got to
what are
start
the
over.
source of wars is the black people. We've all heard that the
Mhm.
the divine nine. We all know it. That you try to tear that down, black folk themselves will kill you. So yeah, that
Right.
ain't gonna happen. The black like everything we build is a reproduction of what white people have done.
Well,
So I agree with that, but it comes into a spaceship.
if
This
we're gonna
goes
talk
back to the
about
black
consciousness,
consciousness.
if we're gonna talk
How do
about it,
you get black people to do that? And the answer is, you look, man. I can't even get. And I'm gonna stop on this one. I can't even get black people, not black people, because I'm not gonna say it's all black people. I'm gonna say there's a group of black people that I converse with regularly, right? Trying to get them to accept that if they're not happy with their kids' grades, then that's good enough. That's enough motivation for them to do something to improve their kids' grades. And the reason that's a conversation is because they'll say stuff like, well, they doing better than all of the people over there in them white schools. What does that have to do with your child? If you're not happy with your child's 93A, and some people ain't happy, that's enough of a reason for you to take steps to improve your child's grade. If you're like, so the baseline is, as a community, are we happy and okay with what's going on? And if the answer is yes, then we good. If the answer is no, it doesn't matter how it measures up to other groups. We take steps to make it better. If we say that the black women's mortality rate during childbirth is cool with us, then we
well,
focus on other things. If we say that it's not, then it doesn't matter that it's the number one rate for all women all over the globe. It's not good enough for us, so we take steps to improve it. That's got to be the mindset.
well, that's one of the reasons why I disagree that there's an overall, or there is any fear of black consciousness. For one, like you said, we don't. If I'm unhappy, if most black people are unhappy with the school systems, but they fail to create alternatives. Most Black people are unhappy with the medical care that they receive, but we fail to create alternatives. The things that we're unhappy with, we fail to create alternatives for them. We
Well, that
can create alternatives. We can, but
well,
we don't. And we know why we don't.
we're people dealing with arrested development in the nanny state.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So dealing with arrested development in the nanny state, the first thing you want to do as kids is make your parents proud. And so that's, they say the best form of flattery is imitation. And we have been beaten since the days of Barbados and the slave making colonies in the Caribbean. They have manufactured the perfect slave. They have manufactured fear. They have manufactured programming. They have manufactured the Negro to operate into the best benefit of white supremacy. It's never been the intent of us being liberated or free. We're the only
Right.
people in this country involuntarily for generations. And trust and believe, if they could get away with committing mass genocide, they would. But it's the fact that globally, America tries to present itself as the world's police and moral compass. So that, um, there's a few things though, because we talked about Black people and doing things for ourselves. But what I saw this past weekend were Black Pan Africanists, Black nationalists, people identify as consciousness, all celebrating Mother's Day. And I always ask this question. I don't have a problem with you celebrating it, but who gave it to you? If it's not a manifestation of our own, is it truly Black consciousness to try to overwhelm or put a Black stamp on something that's white? You know what I'm saying? And we can't do that. Professor Black Truth did something that I thought was extraordinary. He identified April, I think it was the month of April, as Black, uh, the new Black media month, something of that nature. And I thought that was brilliant because it was something that we took. A lot of people on this particular day will be celebrating Malcolm X Day. That in itself is a step in the right direction because we're taking control. We're not asking for the state to sanction a holiday. A lot of Black people are taking that day as recognizing one of our heroes. Um, we have to infuse, confidence, courage with some wins and victories if we're going to persuade the newer generation of Black people. Because once you get a certain age, we already know we are at some point we've all had our experiences in education and dealing with young folk. After a certain age, people become set in their actions, set in their behaviors, and set in their mindsets. We have to get to the younger people. And the biggest hurdle into getting to the younger folk is the fact that they spend more time with parents and family members and other people who will become stumbling blocks in terms of what we're trying to build. And if we're trying to build a real Black consciousness. And let's not forget what was taught on the plantation. First and foremost, our community was made into a matrifocal society, meaning that the whole idea of warriors, warriorhood, and things of that nature would have to come from the women that were raising us or teaching us. Uh, we're basically what I'm saying is we have to get to the younger people, and we have to get past the obstacles that stop us from teaching the younger people about who they are, the observers of to have courage in the consciousness of being Black, and to actually be willing to stand up to something rather than fall for all the other things that we've been dealing with.
Straight up. Let's actually practice Black consciousness for real. Let's do that. Let's practice Black consciousness for real. And then, like he said, teaching others, especially the young ones, how to truly practice Black consciousness. That's what we need to be doing for real. Now, I I appreciate the video. Lewis R. Gordon is the gentleman's name. I appreciate the video because it sparked good conversation and get us to start thinking about Black consciousness. And once again, it's not an attack on him, but it's us having a discussion about Black consciousness. He just made us think about it. But what we are saying is we don't believe that Black consciousness in its current form or how we currently look at it, or see it, define it, or live it is a threat to white supremacy. For one, the points Patrick brought up, because of our inability to practice Black consciousness like we should have been practicing in America. So since we're third or fourth class citizens in America, we're not seen as the same threat and we're not as needed as we used to be in the past. But if we want to change our overall situation, if we want things to be different for us, if we want our future to be different, want a whole different path for us, how about we actually practice Black consciousness for real? We stop trying to be a part of the white system and we do what we need to do for ourselves. Like really practice it for real. Because we believe in us. And I know some of y'all in the comments, you all think because of the discussions that we have, these are not feel good discussions. You all believe that we don't think Black people can win. That's just not true. You might not really listen to what we be saying. If anybody want Black people to win, that's why we've been honest. But we also, through all the information given, we're also letting people know we also have given a lot of information on things that we can do, and gave you information that our master teachers have given, so we can actually start to employ certain things. We just got to do the things.
Yeah, and I want to real quick. When I say what I say, it's definitely not to say that I don't think we can do anything. The point that I often try to make is that the things that we are doing aren't going to work. And so we need to like really try to think about different things to do. Like if we're going to do this, let's do it differently, because what we have been doing has not been working and what we have done has not worked. So if we're going to continue doing what we've been doing, which is, oftentimes the assumptions, especially when it comes to fighting back and all of this other stuff, then no, I don't have that's going to work, because it hasn't worked. So that's mainly where I'm coming from with it. So yeah, I do think we have the capability, and I do think there are opportunities for us to win various components of the struggle we're in. But if we're just going to keep doing what we are doing and thinking about things the way we have been thinking about them, no.
Yeah.
So in other words, just saying, get off the hamster wheel and actually get to do
Yeah. You got to evolve our thinking, evolve our action. Stop. If it hasn't worked, why keep doing it? Why keep banging your head against the wall if it ain't work? So that's how we get it, man. Let's practice true Black consciousness as it was given to us by Steve Biko. Shout out to Lewis R. Gordon, Joseph Ward, Patrick Irvin, Professor Carl Tone Jones, aka Peace Down Friday. This is how we do. Catch y'all next time. Love. Make sure you check the next video.